Chulin, page 59. We'll start at the Mishnah, page 58b, 11 lines from the bottom of the page. Throughout the Talmud, in relatively numerous occasions, you see a formulation of medicine. All kind of ideas how to create a healing for different diseases. Our rabbis pointed out that as much as we like to look at our sacred Talmud as one of our holy books, yet when it's come to a formulation of medicine, it is not panacea, it's not a cure for all illness in our contemporary day-by-day life. The rabbis adamantly require us to be very cautious before using any formula in the Talmud, because it can be a serious deterioration of one's health if he or she use that formula. So in a way, yes, we venerate the wisdom of the Talmud, and we appreciate not only the wisdom but also the leading part to our lives in the Talmud. Yet we should eschew, we should avoid any using of those formulas to our days. And today we're going to visit several examples of those ancient formula of healings. In our Mishnah, we're going to study today several Mishnayot. The first one, we're going to talk about animal diseases, such as eating certain drugs or eating certain food or herbs that contain some type of poisons or venom or other things that can be dangerous. If, for example, a snake, a scorpion bite that animal, can we use that animal for future meat, for Shechita, or not? So let's start the Mishnah. Achuzat hadam, animal that congested with excess blood. So Tiferet Israel said that it was the sudden increasing of blood. The Rambam said that that caused the animal to choke. Either strong, tremendous blood pressure, or can be a more than the normal blood needed. There is a responsa from the late Or Sameach, how you treated animals, for example, in the freezing cold of Siberia, Alaska, or other places in the world that they have a severe weather, or in general, if the animal came out with a very severe weather. How do you slaughter them and how far you go with that? One of the concern is if something happened to that animal prior to that. So it's a long tshuva. But anyway, vehame ushenet, or that was smoke, which means that suffer from smoke inhalation. Vesheachla hardufeni, or the animal chilled and subsequently became sick, or ate a oleander, which is poisonous. V'sheachlat tzoat tarnegolim, they ate the tzoah, the excrement of chicken. So the Rambam said that it's also poisonous for animal, not necessarily to human. The Meiri also expand on that. Or sheshatat maim haraim, or that animal drank foul water, So although in all these cases the animal is in danger, yet as far as the kashrut is concerned, ksheira, you can use it for consumption. However, you should remember, achlas sam hamavet. By contrast, if the animal ate deadly poison, or shehikisha nachash, or if snake bit the animal, muteret mishum treifa. So when it's come to the Torah prohibition of treifa, consumption of the animal will be permitted. However, va'asura mishum sakanat nefashot. However, we are prohibited consumption of that animal because it's a threat to one life to eat it. So the Taz we learn in Tractate Bava Kama, page Kuf Tedvav 115b. Lo yiten livemto mayim megulim lishtot. One should not give an open water, meaning water that stay overnight, and it's a possibility, for example, for a snake to put his poison there, because it's dangerous. And versus here you see that it's not an issue, so it's contradiction. So the answer, it's all depend. If you have a chashash, if you have a concern that this is a poisonous water, such as if it was those days the open mayim megulim, but if it's past several hours, it's different story. So it's like two different categories, two different situations. Anyway, Amar Shmuel says, Hil'ita chiltit treifa. If one fed an animal as a fortida, which is a very sharp plant, it's treifa. So that's, according to some mefarshim, can cause a chorim b'me'ayim, some type of hole in the intestine. Mai ta'ama deminakva lehu lema'ayana, that it perforates its intestines. Metiv Rav Shizvi, אחוזת הדם והמעושנת, ושאכלה ארדופני, ושאכלה צואת תרנגולים, ושתת מים הרעים, הלאיתה תיאה חילתית ופלפנים, אכלה סממה וקשירה. Here you have a list, animal that congested with excess blood, for smoke inhalation, with poisonous, or in all this list that we mentioned earlier, so it's kosher. However, ikisha nachash or shenshachak kelev shoteh, if the snake beat the animal or a mad dog beat it, so muteret mishum treifa v'asura mishum sakanat nefashot. So it's allowed as far as the treifa is concerned. However, when it's come to this type of deadly poison, it's dangerous because it can be a life-threatening situation. So the Gemara said, Kashya chiltit achiltit, Kashya samamavet asamamavet. So it's a difficult for Shmuel's statement from one chiltit to another. The one said treifa, and the other not. And then the statement, the deadly poison, it's a difficult to the Mishnah statement where the deadly poison make the animal prohibited through the threat of one's life. Chiltit achiltit lo kashya. The Gemara said apparent contradiction between the statement about chiltit and another one is not difficult. Here in the Braita referring kan be'alim. So the Maharam Shif explained what exactly involved, and he tried to compare to all the subject of drusa. But he said that here in the case that the animal ate asafoetida, I hope I pronounced it right, it's a chiltit. So leaves which are less dangerous. And over there, Shmuel referring to a case where the animal ate slivers of that, kan bekratin. Samavet asamavet lokashya hadida hade adam, deadly poison. It's it's not a contradiction, because over there is deadly poison, and the other one, it's referring to a case when an animal consume poison that is deadly only to itself. And the Mishnah that prohibited is referring to a case when it's a consumed poison deadly to person. So the Gemara asks, "Samavi debama hainu hardufni?" Poison deadly to an animal is the same as oleander. Why should the Braita mention both? Trei gavnei samamav. The Gemara answered and said the Tana referring here to two types of deadly poison. So usually we don't compare, but the animal in general term are stronger than person. There is a responsa of the Beit She'arim. They ask about duck, female duck, that ate she'achla seed. So avaza she'achla seed. So that create a perforation in the intestine. So he said that's apply only if the owner he'll eata, if he fed her. However, if achla be'atzma, if the duck ate intentionally by itself without instruction of the owner, so he said it's not an issue of treifot. My ti'a, since the above Braita teaches that an animal was fed ti'a, it's kosher. What exactly ti'a? Amar Rav Yehuda said, page 59, Ikara dimrirta. So it is the root of a bitter vegetable. Here you have Rashi. Tosfot also mentioned that it's all variety. It's in Hebrew you call it chonek hadov, kova hanazir. There's all kind of name of bitter vegetable. What type of damage? Now the Gemara is very descriptive. Amar Rav Yehuda Haiman de'achal tlata tiklei chiltit aliba reikana mishtalach mashchei. If a person who eats the weight of 3 shekel of this chiltit, asafoetida, I think, whatever it's called, on empty stomach, his skin sheds due to the fever he contracts. So the Rabbeinu Gershom said that it's consume the skin that left almost no feel normal skin on the body. Amar Rabbi Abahu b'didi ava'uvda, he said this is happened the day which I was involved. Ve'ach lechad tikla chiltita, that I ate a weight of 1 shekel of this chiltit. V'iloch diyat v'maya mishtalach mashkai v'kiyamti ba'atzmi achomat chayeb alea. If I did not immediately set in the water to cool off, my skin will have shed. And I fulfill what they said in the book of Ecclesiastes, chapter 7, verse 12. The wisdom preserves the life of his that has it. So the Mefarshim said that he was baki b'chokhmat harefuah, that he was erudite in the field of medicine. Now it's important of the Maharal. You see, not only the Maharal, but you see others that say that over there was very different than nowadays. And as we said in the introduction, the rabbi and nowadays warn people not to use any formula or any description. Yes, if it's azharot, if it's a specific warning, so that's a different story. But as far as using medicine or type of medicine, that's different. אמר רב יוסף, הימן דאכיל שיצרי באי וארבעה מגוזי ושב בוטיתא דפירחי ושעתי רביעתא דובשה בתקופת תמוז אליבא ריקנה מתעקר טליה דליבי. So here Rav Yosef speak about certain individual that eat something and that can cause a very serious physical damage. He said the individual who eats 16 eggs and 14 nuts and 7 fruits of the caper bush and he drinks a quarter log of honey in a season of the summer, all on an empty stomach, his heartstrings are uprooted. Hahu bar Tavya דעתה לבי ריש גלותה. So it was a situation that the animal was bitten by a poisonous snake, but nevertheless is prohibited for consumption. It's a certain young deer that was brought to the house of the auxiliary after slaughter. The hava mefase kar'an batrayata, whose hind legs had been cut. Bad kerav betzomet agdim ve'achsherei. So Rav inspected at the converges of sinews in the thigh and found them intact. So therefore he said it's kosher. Sabar lemeichal mine be'umtza. So he thought to eat in lightly roasted. Amar leShmuel lo chai shmar lenikurei. Shmuel said to him, are you not concerned about the possibility that may have a snake bite? Amar le mai takanta. Says to him, how you can rectify such uncertainty? He said, notvei betanura deubatig nafshei. So Shmuel said to him, we shall set it in a hot oven, as it will then inspect itself. Nafal tilchei tilchei. So Shmuel set in the oven on a spit, and the melt fell off the bone bit by bit, a sign that the snake had bitten the young deer. Karele Shmuel alei de Rav lo yoneh latzadik kol aven. Shmuel recited about Rav the verse in the book of Proverbs, chapter 12. There shall no mischief befall the righteous, since he was saved due to his righteousness. Kare Rav alei Shmuel kol raz lo anei islach. Rav recited about Shmuel the verse from the book of Daniel, chapter 4, verse 6, and no secret causes you trouble, since he was learned even with regard to such matters. So the Aruch Laner asks a question. He says, you see in several Gemarot, for example, Rabbi Ishmael that made mistakes and others, and he tried to explain the Aruch Laner that there is a difference between sakana gashmit, physical, dangerous, versus, in a way, spiritual, that the person can do tshuva. He mentioned the famous Gemara in Yevamot that Rav and Shmuel wants to put Rav Sheila in an idui, in cherem, excommunication. And he quotes the verse there, based on the Tanakh, Sheva Pamim, 7 times the righteous can fall and come back. So the Ben Yehoyada, the Ben Ishchai asked, what's the big chidush? Shmuel was a very big medical doctor. He was, according to other Gemarot, the doctor of Rebbe. So he brings Maran Achida B'Shem HaKadmonim from the early rabbis, that, as we know, Rav kibel al atzmo, accept upon himself not to eat in anybody else, because maybe lo malach kaog, and he didn't salt it properly, maybe he didn't do the Shechita properly. Now, when it's come to auxiliary, le'resh galuta, lo yachol itchamek, he couldn't run away from that. So this is like kind of a guidance and advice to save him, that it's maybe the food is dangerous. So only you know the truth that I do not want to eat it, but you find a way to exempt me from that. So the Rama said that in our days, he said that it's a total different story. But the Shach brings the Be'er Sheva, that it's strongly recommended to check regardless. Next Mishnah, dealing with the sign of purity for different animals, you can eat them. And that's the Rambam said that it's a mitzvah taseh, to know exactly. Simanei be'ema v'chayin emru ben Torah. If you go look at Book of Vayikra, chapter 11, Book of Dvarim, chapter 14, you see that there is signs that indicate that they're domesticated animals, and and undomesticated animals are kosher, and that's stated in the Torah, and the sign of kosher bird, the simanei arfot, lo ne'emru, were not explicitly stated. So, if you examine the text in the Torah, you don't find it. However, the sages said that even you have in the Torah the 24 type of species, but again, we all heavily depend on the interpretation of our sages. So the book Abir HaRoim, על אבני נזר, מסוכת שוב, he said that it brings also the Arizal that said that it's not saying clearly, but it's remuzed בתורה. כל ציפור טהור, צדיק בציפור, second letter of the אצבע, פ' זפק, and then ו' is דורס, ריש זה קורקבן. So anyway, that's the Arizal, and obviously there is much to say about that interpretation. Anyway, אבל אמרו חכמים, כל עוף הדורס טמא. However, the sages stated certain sign in the bird that any bird that claws its prey and eat it is non-kosher. Rashi, האוחז בציפורניו ומגביה מן הקרקע מה שאוכל. He held in his nail and lifted from the ground whatever he eats. כל שיש לו אצבע יתרה. So any bird that has an extra digit beyond the leg, slightly elevated above the other digits. So Rashi said, אצבע הגבוה שאחורי האצבעות. And the crop, which is a sack alongside the gullet, in which food is stored prior to digestion, and for which the yellowish membranes inside the gizzard can be peeled. So they said, טמא כל שיש בו אצבע יקרה, וזבק וקורבנו נקלף טהור. So it's kosher. Rabbi Lazar, so the Rambam said that it's enough to have אחד הסימנים, one of the signs. The Rishonim said that it has to have all the three. As we said, that Rambam hold that it's a big mitzvah to occupy the person with all those halachot. Which one is tahor, which one is tameh. Rabbi Lazar ברבי צדוק אומר, כל עוף החולק על רגליו tameh. Rabbi Lazar, son of Rabbi Tzadok, says, any bird that splits the digit of its feet when standing on a string, placing 2 digits on one side of the sitting and 2 at the other, is non-kosher. Uvachagavim, and the grasshoppers. Grasshoppers, based on what the Torah tells us in Vayikra chapter 11, there are some. Here is the category. They said the grasshoppers that have שיש לו 4 רגליים ו4 כנפיים וקרצולי וכנפיו חופין את רובו. 4 legs, 4 wings, 2 additional jumping legs, and whose wings cover most of its body, it's kosher. I don't have any desire to eat those, but anyway. Rabbi Yossi אומר, ושמוך אגב. Rabbi Yossi said that this applies only in the name of its species is grasshopper. ובדגים כל שיש לו סנפיר וקסקסת. Let's come to a fish. The signs are explicitly stated in the Torah, any fish that has a fin and scale is kosher. ואלו הם קסקסים הקבועים בו וסנפירים הפורח בהם. So Rabbi Yehuda said 2 scales and 1 fin. And these are scales, those that are fixed to its body, and fins are those which the fish swims. Tanu Rabbanan. Elu simanei behema. What the Torah said in the book of Dvarim, chapter 14. The Mishnah states that the signs of a kosher domesticated animal are stated in the Torah. With regard to this, the sages taught in the Braita that these are the signs of a kosher domesticated animal. The Torah said, וכל בהמה מפרסת פרסה ושוסעת שסה שתי פרסות מעלת גרה בבהמה אותה תאכלו. Whatever parts of the hoof and its wholly cloven footed, and choose the cud among the animals that you eat. כל בהמה שמעלת גרה בידוע שאין לה שיניים למעלה וטהורה. They said any animal that chews the cud certainly has no upper front teeth, which is the incisors, so therefore it's kosher. That's the שיניים קדמיות בלסת העליונה. וכלל ההוא. And they said that this is the established principle. והרי גמל דמלא גרעו ואין לו שיניים למעלה וטמא. You see a good example that a camel, they have an upper front teeth, it's still not kosher. It chews and cud. So the Gemara said, Gamal nivei itlei. The camel has a cuspid-like upper incisors, one on each side. Vare ben gamal namei leitlei. So they said that the young camel, which does not have the cuspid-like upper incisors, and it's still not kosher. The two, and furthermore, aren't these, והרי שפן וארנב ודמלא גרעין ויש להם שיניים למעלה וטמאים. You have the hyrax and the hare, which chew and cud, and yet they have upper front teeth, and they are not kosher. Third question, ועוד שיניים מכתיב בברייתא. Are teeth written in the Torah when it's come to kosher status of an animal? אלא אחי כאמר. Whether this is what the Tana is saying. כל בהמה שאין לה שיניים למעלה בידוע שהיא מעלת גרה ומפרסת פרסה וטהורה. Any animal that does not have upper front teeth certainly chews the cud and parts the hoof and is kosher. So the Gemara asks, ולבדוק בפרסותיה. But why should one inspect the teeth? Let him simply inspect whether the hooves are cloven. So the Gemara responds, כגון שהיו פרסותיה חתוכות. So the one inspect the teeth where its hooves were cut, so you cannot tell whether they are cloven. וכדרב חיסדא, and that followed the statement of רב חיסדא. דאמר רב חיסדא היה מלך במדבר ומצא במה שפרסותיה חתוכות. One walking in the wilderness, and he found an animal whose hooves were cut. בודק בפיה, he should check, inspect its mouth. אם אין לה שיניים למעלה בידוע שהיא טהורה. If there is no upper front teeth, it's certainly kosher. אם לאו בידוע שהיא טמאה, otherwise, it's clearly not kosher. Provided ובלבד שיכיר גמל, that he recognized that this animal is not a camel, which is non-kosher even though it has no upper incisors. So the Gemara asks, why must one recognize that this is not a camel? Gamal nivei itlei. A camel has a cuspid-like upper incisors. So rather say, Ela ubilvad shiakir ben gamal, provided that one recognizes that there is no a young camel which is no cuspid-like upper incisors. לאו אמרת מאיכה בן גמל, איכה נמי מינה חרינה דדמה לבית גמל. How can one rely only on an inspection of the mouth? Did you not say that there is a young camel which has no upper incisors but still is not kosher? And if so, איכה נמי מינה חרינה דדמה לבית גמל. There is another species that is similar to young camel and is not kosher despite having no upper incision. So the Gemara responds, there's a possibility, לא סלקא לדרך נתן לי ורבי ישמעאל, ואת הגמל כמעלה גרעו. The Torah said in Leviticus chapter 11 verse 4, the camel because it chews and cud, but parts, not the hoof, it is unclear. שליט בעולמו, the Almighty God, who is ruler of the world, יודע שאין לך דבר מעלה גרה וטמא, אלא גמל. He knows that there is nothing other than the camel chews and cud, and it's still not kosher. לפיכך פרט לו הכתוב הוא. So therefore the pasuk, the verse, singles clearly out in the word it, which is it and no others. So ואמר רב חיסדא, היה מהלך בדרך ומצא במה שפיה פגום, the reef and ראש סד במדבר. If one was walking in the road or in the wilderness and he found an animal whose mouth was mutilated, mutilated. I'm just reading the translation. He may inspect its hooves. So, בודק בפרסותיהם, פרסותיה סדוקות בידוע שהיא טהורה, ואם לאו בידוע שהיא טמאה. So it's, if you recognize that there is not a pig which is not kosher, even it has cloven hooves. בלבד שיכיר חזיר. לאו אמרתי כחזיר, יקנה ממין האחרינא דדמיא לחזיר. So that it's a pork, but there is another one that looks like a pig. לא סגל תחת תלמוד רבי ישמעאל בית החזיר כי מפריס פרסהו. So the pig because it parts the hoof. And the same way is שליט בעולמו יודע שאין לך דבר שמפריס פרסה וטמא לחזיר. The Almighty God, the ruler of the world, he knows that there is no other the pig part of the hoof, that it's still not kosher. Therefore, the verse singles it out with the word it. לפיכך פירט בה כתוב הוא. The third memra of Rav Chisda in that matter, אמר רב חיסדא היה מלך במדבר, ומצא במה שפיה פגמום ופרסותיה חתוכות. One walking in the wilderness, and he found an animal whose mouth was mutilated and whose hooves were cut. בודק בבשרה, אם מהלך שתי וערב, בידוע שהיא טהורה, ואם לאו בידוע שהיא טמאה. He may inspect its flesh. If it runs like rap and woof, which is part of its stretches vertically and part of it horizontally, it's certainly kosher. Otherwise, it's certainly not kosher. Provided, בלבד שיכיר הרוד, that one recognize that animal that is not wild donkey, which is not kosher, even though its flesh run like rap and hoof. So the Gemara asks, Lav amarta ika arod? Didn't you say that there is a wild donkey whose flesh runs like rap and hoof, but who's still not kosher? If so, perhaps ikana memina achrina dedamya le'arod. There's also other species that it's similar to wild donkey. The Gemara responded and said, Gemirei deleika. It is learned in our tradition that there is no other similar species. The Gemara asks, Ve'icha bodek. And where does he inspect the flesh? Amar Abaye v'item Rav Chisda bechanfei ha'oketz. He said that at the edge of the tailbone, on the upper thigh. So that's the Aruch HaShulchan in Yoredei HaPei, Ma'adanei HaShulchan Pei. That said that those who are really erudite and know the simanim, nowadays, since we're not sure, so the Chochmat Adam and others said we should not eat those. Simanei Chaya, the Mishnah said a sign of undomesticated animal were stated in the Torah. Tanu Rabbanan lo Simanei Chaya. Sages teach in the Braita, these are the sign of undomesticated animal. So the Gemara interjected and said, Chaya, bechlal b'mayle simanim. Why does one need signs for an undomesticated animal? An undomesticated animal is included in the category of domesticated animal with regard to signs, as the Pasuk states in Leviticus chapter 11 verse 2. These are the living things, which is chaya, which you may eat among all the animals, and that are on the earth. So whatsoever part of the roof, that so what's the Braita come to teach us? So Rabbi Zera explained the Braita. Amar Rabbi Zera said, 59b, Le'atir chelba. So here, when we talk about permitting a forbidden fat, it's not over the simanei tahara, the sign of purity. Here we need to deem the animal undomesticated. So fat that is forbidden for consumption in domesticated animal is permitted in undomesticated animal. If you look at the Torah in Vayikra chapter 7, they said, Kol chelev shor v'chesev ha'ez lo tuchlu. So that's the Gemara later on page 117 emphasizes that that's apply only to a pure behemat tehora, not chaya. Anyway, ואחי כאמר, אלו סימני חיה שחלבה מותר. כל שיש לה קרניים וטלפיים. So which one is the sign of kosher undomesticated animal that is permitted? That's the had horns and cloven hooves in an undomesticated animal. רבי דוסה אומר, אם יש לה קרניים, אתה צריך לחזור על טלפיים. יש לה טלפיים, צריך אתה לחזור על קרניים. וקרש, אף על פי שאין לו קרן אחת, מותר. So Rabbi Dosa says, if it has horns, it's certainly a kosher undomesticated animal. And you don't need to search for cloven hooves. However, if it has cloven hooves, you must still search for horns. And when it's come to those animals, it's called keresh. Later we explain what is it. Even though it has only one horn, its fat permitted for consumption. It's chayat Torah. So the Gemara asks, uchlalo, is that basically established principle? והעז, יש לו קרניים וטלפיים, בחלבו אסור. They take a good example, goat, they have horns, they have cloven hooves, and the fat is forbidden. כל חלב שור וחסב האב לא תאכלו. So the Gemara said, guess what? כרוכות בעינן. So we require horns that are layered to designate a kosher animal as undomesticated. A goat horns are not layers. So the Gemara asks, והרשות דכרוכות וחלבו אסור. You see bull which has layered horn, and it's still fat is forbidden since it's domesticated. So the Gemara said, charukot be'inan. We require horn that are grooved. A bull's horn are not grooved. So the Gemara asks, v'harei ez דחרוקות וחלבו אסור. But isn't there a goat which has grooved horns and still its fat is forbidden? So the Gemara said, ופוצלות בעינן. We require horns that are branched, and a goat's horn are not branched. So the Gemara asks, והרי צבי דאין מפוצלות וחלבו מותר. But you have a gazelle whose horn are not branched and still its fat permitted. That's one of those chayot torah that was said in Dvarim chapter 14 verse 5. So the Gemara said, chadurot ba'inan. We require horns that are rounded and not broad like those of a sheep. Hilkach, so consequently, therefore, heichad demipatzla, where an animal horns are branched, lo dina velo dayana. There is neither judgment nor judge, and the animal is without a doubt undomesticated. Heichad delo mipatzla beinan kruchot chadurot v'charukot vehu demibla chirkaihu. So we are not branched. We require that they be layered, rounded and grooved, and it must be grooved in a pattern such that its grooves are absorbed into one another. V'hainu sfeika deiza karkoz. So that was the ambiguity, the uncertainty before the sages in regard to a special a goat that it's called a karkoz goat, whether it's considered a domesticated animal. There was a certain karkoz goat that was in a house of the exiliot, the akur melotzina de tarba, from which they removed the full basket of fat after slaughtered. Rav Achai asar, Rav Shmuel bered Rabbi Abahu achal minei. Rav Achai deemed the fat forbidden because it's considered its domesticated animal, And Rav Shmuel, son of Rabbi Abau, ate from it. Karei Nafshei, read the pasuk in Mishlei in Proverbs chapter 18, verse 20, Mipri fi ish tizba bitno. A man's belly shall be filled with the fruits of his mouth. In other words, due to his learning, he knew it was permitted to eat the fat of the coarse goat. So Shalchu mitam, from Eretz Israel to Babylon, they sends a message. Hilchet akvatau de Shmuel b'red Rabbi Abau, v'yizaru b'Rabbeinu Achai shemeir enegolau. So they said the halacha is follow the view of Rav Shmuel, son of Rabbi Abau, that a carcass goat is an undomesticated animal and its fat is permitted, but nevertheless be very mindful of the honor of our great master and teacher Achai, who deem it forbidden, and do not partake of the fat in his presence, as he enlightens the eyes of the exile, meaning he deserves great honor, Rashi said. וקרש אף על פי שאין לו קרן אחת חלבו מותר. אמר רב יהודה, קרש תביה דבי לעי. So the קרש is the gazelle that is a native in the area of that place, דבי לעי. טיגרס אריה דבי לעי. טיגרס, it's a lion דבי לעי. אמר רב כהנא, 9 עם הטה, הווה בין אונה לאונה דאריה דבי לעי. They said that there are 9 cubits between the ears of the lion of the Beilai. Rav Yosef said, Rav Yosef shitzar amhata v'mishachet d'tavya de Beilai. Says a gazelle of Beit Leah have 16 cubits. Amar le Caesar, the Caesar, the emperor of Roman emperor, said to Rabbi Yoshua ben Hanania, Elohechem kariyeh matil. Your God is like a lion. Dechtiv areh shag milo ira. They said lion is a road. Who will not fear? But if so, my revuta, what is his greatness? Parasha katil aryeh, Kavaleomen can kill a lion. So Rabbi Yoshua responded to him and said, Amar lei lav kehai aryeh matil. The Almighty is not compared to that lion which a cavalierman can kill. Rather, God is compared to what? Ke'arya de ve'ilai matil, to the lion of Baalei Ilai. So the emperor said to him, Amar lei lo matzit chazit lei. I ask that you show it to me. Amar lei ibra chazin ala. Rabbi Yeshua said to him, you cannot see it. Be'arach mei. So in other words, the emperor said to him, truly I wish to see it. Rabbi Yeshua prayed for mercy. And the lion of Beilai, v'itkar meduchtei, set off from its place of origin toward Rome. Miracle. Ki hava marchik 400 parsei, when it was 400 parsaot away from Rome, Naham chad kala, it rolls once. Afilu kol me'abarta, and all the pregnant women miscarried from the great trepidation, great fear. Vishua de Romi nafal, and the wall of Rome fell. Ademircha tlat pe'a parsei yam kala acharina. When it was 300 parsa away, it rolls another time, and all the men's front and back teeth fell out from fear. Natu kachev shinit gabri, ve'afu nafal mekursei la'achra, and even he, the emperor, fell from his throne to the ground. Amar lei, so the Caesar, the emperor, said to Rabbi Yeshua ben Hanania, B'matuta minach, I beg you, ba'era chamei aleh de leheder leduchtei, pray for mercy with regard to it, that it will return to his place from which it came. Be'ar chamei aleh. So he really, Rabbi Yoshua, beg and pray for mercy, and ve'adar le'atri, and he returned to his place from which it came. So Tiferet Yaakov dealt with the idea of leduchte, leatre. There are those who say in both. And obviously, we don't have much time. There is a lot of write-up exactly what happened and how it happens. One of them, it's the book that I refer many times, my brother-in-law, the Daf al Daf, that he expanded on this a lot.